AITA for exposing my mom for using my dad's watch to pressure me into signing a waiver? I'm Caitlin, 38, the younger daughter in a family where keeping the peace usually meant everyone else got to throw the match and I was expected to stomp out the fire. My mom, Gloria, has always called my older sister Brianna the sensitive one, which somehow made me the one who could handle being blamed, ignored, and sent the bill. I'm the kind of person who saves receipts in labeled folders and keeps extra napkins in my glove box, not because I'm dramatic, but because my family has always had a way of pretending things never happened unless I could prove them twice. My dad, Patrick, used to say I was steady. When I was younger, I liked that. It sounded like a compliment. Steady meant he trusted me to follow directions, remember appointments, call people back, and keep my head when the house got loud. It was only after I got older that I realized steady had become another word for available. Brianna cried, so people brought her tissues. I handled the problem, so people handed me another one. That was the pattern long before Dad died. When Mom's birthday rolled around a few years ago, Brianna forgot until the afternoon of. I had ordered flowers, picked up a cake, and made sure Mom's favorite takeout showed up before dinner. Brianna came in late with red eyes and a card she bought from the gas station. Mom hugged her like she had crossed a battlefield. She's had a lot going on, Mom told me later while I was washing the plates. I know, I said. I'm not mad. Mom gave me that look, the one where her mouth softened but her eyes sharpened. You don't have to say it like that. Like what? Like you're keeping score. I looked at the sink full of frosting-streaked forks and decided not to answer. That was another thing my family did. If I remembered what happened, I was keeping score. If Mom remembered, it was family history. If Brianna remembered, it was trauma. It happened with money too. Brianna would borrow a little here, a little there, always with an explanation that sounded too emotional to question. The car insurance bounced. One of her kids needed school clothes. Mason's hours had been weird. She was between things. She would pay me back Friday. Then Friday became next Friday, then the next time things settled down. Whenever I asked, she acted wounded. I said I would, she'd say. You make me feel like a criminal. Mom always came in right behind her. You know how Brianna gets when she feels judged. Asking to be paid back isn't judging her, I said once. It feels that way to her. That sentence could have been printed on our family crest. If Brianna felt blamed, the rest of us were supposed to rearrange reality until she felt comfortable again. If I felt used, Mom said I was being cold. If I said no, she said I had changed. If I asked for clarity, she said love should not require paperwork. So I learned to make paperwork anyway. I didn't do it with some grand plan in mind. I did it because after enough, that never happened conversations, you start saving screenshots for your own sanity. I kept receipts. I saved bank confirmations. I labeled email folders. Gloria used to roll her eyes and say, "You and your little records," like being able to prove the truth was some weird hobby. Then Dad died, and those little records became the only thing standing between me and the version of me my mother tried to sell. Dad's death was sudden enough to knock the air out of the family, but not so sudden that there were no decisions to make. There are always decisions to make after someone dies. People talk about grief like it's a room you sit in, but for me it was a phone that would not stop ringing. The funeral home needed a deposit. The insurance company needed forms. The bank needed death certificates. Relatives needed dates, times, addresses, and reassurance. Mom needed someone to sit beside her while she cried over boxes of old photos. Brianna needed everyone to understand she could not possibly think about numbers because she was drowning. I was grieving too, but I grieved with a pen in my hand. Mom called me the morning after Dad died. Her voice was thin and strange. I can't look at numbers right now, she said. Please, Caitlin. Your father would want us not to fight. That sentence became a key she used for every lock. At first, I did what needed to be done because I loved my dad and because nobody else was moving. I called the funeral home and asked what had to be paid immediately. I ordered extra copies of the death certificate. I helped Mom find Dad's old documents in the cabinet under the hallway towels, because of course, Dad had kept life insurance papers in the least logical place possible. I answered emails from the estate attorney's assistant. I sent scan forms. I made a spreadsheet because there were too many moving pieces and everyone else seemed allergic to tracking them. Brianna sent long texts. I'm sorry, I just can't handle this today. Can you ask Mom? I don't want to upset her. Please don't make this about money right now. The first time money was short, it was the funeral home balance. Mom called and said there had been a mix-up transferring funds from the account she was using for Dad's final expenses. Her voice shook so badly I stopped loading the dishwasher and sat down at my kitchen table. They said if we don't clear it by Friday, there's going to be a problem, she said. How much? She told me. It was not a life-destroying amount, but it was not small. It was enough to matter. Did Brianna send her half? I asked. Mom sighed like I had cursed in church. Caitlin, please. Your sister is barely holding herself together. I'm not attacking her. I'm asking. Well, can you just help this once? We'll sort it out after. I paid it directly to the funeral home. I saved the confirmation email and put it in a folder called Funeral Home. I remember staring at the words payment received and feeling ashamed that part of me was already suspicious. A week later, Brianna sent me a Venmo request for $600 with a note that said, Mom's meds/groceries, will repay when insurance comes. I called Mom. Do you need groceries? I asked. What? No. Why? I should have stopped there. Instead, I paid it and screenshotted the request because Brianna texted right after. Please don't make Mom deal with this. She'll fall apart. That was the first time I realized everyone in my family knew exactly which guilt button to press. The amounts started blurring together after that. A transfer here. A bill there. Something for flowers that had already been paid. Something for a memorial slideshow that Mason's cousin was supposedly making. A reimbursement for Dad's stuff that Brianna never explained clearly. I wasn't stupid. I knew something was off. But I also knew grief makes people messy, and I kept telling myself not to become the person who turned my father's death into a ledger. Then I saw the estate account numbers. It was not a huge estate. Dad was not secretly rich. There was enough to cover final expenses, settle some accounts, and leave a few meaningful things behind. The most important thing to me was never the money. It was Dad's old watch. It was a plain old watch with a scratched face and a leather band he had replaced twice. He wore it to every school event, every holiday dinner, every airport pickup. When I was little, I used to sit next to him and twist the watch around his wrist while he watched baseball with the sound low. After he died, Mom found a handwritten note tucked inside a folder with some old paperwork. It said in Dad's uneven block letters, make sure both girls get something of mine. Don't let stuff become a fight. I cried when I read it. Mom cried too. Brianna cried the loudest. At the time, Mom said, of course. We'll be fair. Then fairness became flexible. About 6 weeks after Dad's funeral, Mom left me a voicemail. She hated putting certain things in writing. That was one of her tells. Texts were for guilt. Phone calls were for things she might later want to deny. Her voice started sweet. Hi, honey. I know you're busy. I just need you not to panic, okay? Never a great opening. She said there had been another shortfall from the account used for final expenses. She said Brianna had borrowed some money because she thought she could put it back before anyone noticed. She was drowning, Mom said. She couldn't think straight. It wasn't malicious. I stood in the hallway with my phone pressed to my ear, staring at the laundry basket by my feet. How much did she take? I asked even though I was listening to a voicemail and could not actually interrupt. Mom kept talking. You helped, yes, and I appreciate it. But don't tell the family. They don't need every detail. It'll only make Brianna look bad. And your father would hate that. There it was again. Dad is a locked door. Dad is a guilt trip. Dad is a reason to keep Brianna safe from consequences. I saved the voicemail. I saved it because something in me finally understood that appreciation spoken in private could become an accusation in public. I still covered the shortfall. Not because I agreed with it, but because the invoice attached to it had a due date and Dad's name on it. I paid it, saved the confirmation, and sent Mom one text. I covered this. I need written repayment terms from Brianna before I send another $1. Mom did not respond for 6 hours. Then she called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "This is not the time for contracts." I wrote back, "It became time when money went missing." She replied, "When did you become this hard?" I stared at that message for a long time. I could hear her voice in it, disappointed and dramatic, like I had personally invented cruelty by asking an adult woman to account for money she took. I typed, deleted, typed again, and finally sent. Probably around the third time I paid for someone else's emergency and got called selfish for asking what happened. That was the day the family temperature changed. First it was small. Cousin Jenna stopped liking my comments. Uncle Paul sent me a text that said, "Your mom has been through enough. Don't make this harder." I wrote, "What exactly did she tell you?" He never answered. Then Aunt Linda posted something on Facebook about how grief reveals who really shows up. I did not comment. Mom had trained me well enough that my first instinct was still to avoid making things worse. Then my cousin Mark texted, "I know money is tight for everyone, but your mom shouldn't have to beg her own daughter." I sat on my couch reading that one with my thumb hovering over the screen. Beg? That was when I understood the trial had already started, and I was the only one who had not been invited. I wanted to send everything right then. Screenshots, receipts, dates, mom's voicemail, all of it. I wanted to drop it into the family group chat and watch the dots appear. Instead, I put my phone down, made tea I did not drink, and opened my laptop. If my mother was building a story, I needed a timeline. I spent 2 nights organizing everything. Funeral home receipt, estate emails, bank confirmations, Venmo screenshots from Brianna, Zelle transfers, texts from mom thanking me privately, and then scolding me when I asked for repayment. I transcribed the voicemail and kept the original saved in 2 places. I was not planning to use it unless I had to. That may sound ridiculous considering I printed it all, but it's true. Some part of me still hoped mom would cool down and remember that a lie about grief is still a lie. Then Aunt Rachel texted me. Rachel is mom's younger sister, and she has always been the practical one. Not warm exactly, but fair when she has the facts. Her text came on a Wednesday afternoon. "Are you really okay with what Gloria decided for Saturday?" I read it twice. What did she decide? I wrote back. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She said you already know. Maybe I shouldn't get in the middle. My stomach tightened. Rachel, I don't know what you're talking about. A minute later she called. She sounded uncomfortable. Your mother said Saturday is about remembering Patrick and settling some family things. She said you had agreed Brianna should have the watch since Brianna stayed close through everything. The watch. I got up and walked into the kitchen even though there was no reason to move. I did not agree to that, I said. Rachel was quiet for a second. She also said you refused to help with the funeral balance. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my brain could not find another exit. Rachel, I said slowly, do you remember seeing my name on the funeral home emails? Yes. That's why I'm calling. The numbers aren't making sense to me. I closed my eyes. I'm not going to ask you to take my word for anything, I said. But please keep an open mind Saturday. And if she starts talking about me abandoning the family, remember this conversation. Rachel said, all right. That was all. No dramatic promise. No instant loyalty. Just all right. It was more than I had gotten from anyone else. On Saturday, I almost did not go. I stood in my bedroom wearing a black sweater and jeans, looking at the folder on my dresser. I had labeled the tabs in blue pen. Funeral home, estate account, Brianna transfers, Gloria messages, timeline. I had printed one clean copy for myself and made a digital folder called The Story You Didn't Hear. I told myself I was not bringing a weapon. I was bringing a mirror. Mom's house smelled like green bean casserole, coffee, and the lemon cleaner she used whenever guests came over. Folding chairs lined the living room wall. Paper plates sat at the end of the kitchen counter beside plastic forks wrapped in napkins. Someone had set framed photos of Dad on the side table. Dad holding a fish, Dad in a faded baseball cap, Dad asleep in a recliner with one of Brianna's kids curled against him. And there, on a small table near Mom's chair, was the watch. It sat in a velvet box like it was part of a ceremony. Brianna was on the couch beside Mom, shoulders hunched, hands wrapped around a mug she was not drinking from. She had the soft, watery look she used when she wanted people to lower their voices around her. Mason stood near the doorway with a paper plate, chewing too slowly and avoiding eye contact. Aunt Rachel caught my eye from near the dining table. She looked at the folder under my arm, then at the paper stacked beside Mom's plate. Her mouth tightened. Mom came over and hugged me with one arm. "You came," she said, just loud enough for people nearby to hear. I said I would. I wasn't sure. I looked at her. Why wouldn't I? Her face did that thing where it rearranged itself into sadness. Tonight is about honoring your father and finally putting some painful things to rest. In my family, putting things to rest usually meant burying the part where someone owed me money. I said, sure. Dinner was stiff. People made small talk about traffic, kids, casseroles, how good Dad looked in the old photos. Every few minutes, someone glanced at me like they were waiting for me to do whatever Mom had told them I might do. I ate half a roll and moved food around my plate. Brianna leaned across Mason and said, "I'm glad you came." It sounded like a line she had practiced. I said, "Me too." She blinked like she had expected more. Maybe an apology. Maybe a fight. I gave her neither. After the plates were mostly empty, Mom stood. She tapped her fork lightly against her water glass, even though everyone was already watching her. "I want to say something," she began. Of course she did. She stood beneath a framed photo of Dad from their anniversary dinner years ago. Her voice was warm and trembling in exactly the way that made people lean in. "Patrick loved this family more than anything," she said. "And losing him showed me a lot about love. It showed me who shows up when things are hard. It showed me who helps quietly, without making everything about themselves." I felt Aunt Rachel's eyes flick to me. Mom continued. "Brianna has been so tender through all of this. So present. She has stayed close, called me, checked on me, cried with me. She has honored her father with her heart." Brianna looked down. Mason rubbed her back. Then Mom turned slightly, just enough that the room followed her gaze to me. "And Caitlin," she said with a heavy sigh, "has always been practical. Sometimes too practical. Sometimes so focused on numbers and being right that she forgets grief is not a bill to be itemized." The room went quiet in that hungry way families get when drama finally arrives. I put my fork down. Mom looked at me with wet eyes. "Your father would be heartbroken seeing you keep score like this. Some people helped quietly because they love their family. Others made us feel like every act of help came with a receipt attached." I almost smiled at the irony, but I knew it would make me look cruel. Brianna whispered, "Mom, you don't have to do this." She said it just loud enough for everyone to hear. Mom reached for her hand. "No, I do. Because this family needs to heal." Uncle Paul muttered, "Amen." Mom picked up the velvet box. She opened it slowly. Dad's watch rested inside, its scratched face catching the dining room light. "Your father's watch should go to the daughter who stayed close to family," Mom said. "The daughter who didn't turn his passing into a fight over money." My chest hurt, but my hands were steady. She looked at Brianna. "I want you to have it." Brianna covered her mouth and started crying. Not loud, just enough. The room softened around her like it always did. Then Mom picked up the stack of papers by her plate and slid them across the table toward me. "This is just a simple family agreement," she said. "A formality. It says you won't challenge certain keepsakes or bring up reimbursement issues later. We can have it notarized this week. Sign it tonight and we can all move forward." I looked down at the first page. It was some generic release template printed from the internet, with my name typed in uneven spacing. It mentioned personal property, estate-related expenses, and voluntary waiver of reimbursement claims. I let out one quiet breath. So that was the plan. Humiliate me first. Make Brianna the grieving daughter. Put Dad's watch in her hands. Then pressure me into signing away my right to question the money while the family stared at me like I was the problem. Uncle Paul leaned back in his chair. "Just sign it, Caitlin. Don't do this to your mother." I looked at him. "Do what?" "Read before signing." Mom's face tightened. "You always have to make everything ugly." I touched the edge of the paper. "No. I usually make things paid." A couple of people shifted in their seats. Brianna sniffed. "Why are you doing this?" "I haven't done anything." "You're making Mom beg." I looked from her to Mom. Nobody begged when they asked me for transfers. Mom's voice turned low. "This is exactly what I mean. You keep score." I nodded once. Yes, I do. The room went still. Mom blinked like she had expected me to deny it. I slid the waiver back toward her. I'm not signing something I haven't read. It's for family peace. Family peace doesn't usually need a release of reimbursement claims. Mason finally spoke. Can we not do this right now? I turned to him. That would have worked better before your mother-in-law made a speech about me abandoning the family. He looked down at his plate. Mom put a hand to her chest. I never said you abandoned us. I looked around the table. Is that not what everyone heard? No one answered. A cousin near the wall checked his phone. Someone had already texted the family group chat. I felt my own phone buzz in my pocket then again. Mom said, I said your heart was in the wrong place. I picked up the folder from the chair beside me and set it on the table. Aunt Rachel leaned forward. I looked directly at Mom. Do you want to tell them the whole story or should I? Her eyes flashed. For 1 second, the sad mother disappeared, and I saw the woman who used to hiss at me in the kitchen after smiling through dinner. Go ahead, she said. Embarrass your mother if that's who you are. That was the last door closing. I opened the folder. Nobody moved. I took out the one-page timeline first because I knew if I started with emotion, they would call it drama. Dates are harder to cry over. You all got the version where I was selfish, I said. Now here's the version with dates. Mom made a sound. Caitlin. No, I said. Not loud. Just firm. You made it public. I'm making it accurate. I pulled out the funeral home receipt. This is the funeral balance Mom just implied I refused to help with. I paid it directly on March 14th. That's my confirmation number. Rachel put on her reading glasses and reached for the page when I slid it toward her. I pulled out the bank transfer confirmations. These are transfers Mom requested for estate expenses. These are the texts where she thanked me. Mom said, I never said you did nothing. You said I let the family drown. I said you made us feel judged. You asked me to cover missing money and then told people I was focused on inheritance. Brianna started crying harder. I was grieving too, Caitlin. I looked at her. So was I. You act like I planned this. I pulled out the Venmo screenshots. You wrote, I swear I'll put it back before anyone notices. That sounds like you knew exactly what it was. A low murmur moved through the room. Brianna's face went pale. Why do you have that? Because you sent it to me. Mason leaned in. This feels like something you two should handle privately. I looked at him and then at the room full of relatives who had apparently been discussing my selfishness for weeks. It was private until I was publicly accused of abandoning my family. I picked up my phone and opened the family group chat. There were already messages. Cousin Mark. What is going on? Aunt Linda. This is not the time. Uncle Paul. Caitlin needs to think about her mother. I attached the digital folder and typed, the story you didn't hear. Then I hit send. Phones started buzzing around the room like insects. Mom's face changed. What did you just do? I sent everyone the documents you left out. You had no right. I had every right to defend myself against a lie. Brianna stood halfway up, then sat back down. You're destroying this family over money. No, Brianna, I said. You broke things and Mom handed me the bill. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. I turned to the Gloria Messages tab and pulled out the voicemail transcript. Mom's hand shot out. That was private. So were the bills I paid. You recorded me? You left a voicemail. Rachel looked up. Gloria. Mom ignored her. You saved a voicemail from your grieving mother to use against her? I saved a voicemail where you admitted I helped and asked me not to tell the family because it would make Brianna look bad. I read only the important part because I was not trying to perform. You said, you helped, yes, and I appreciate it. But don't tell the family. They don't need every detail. It'll only make Brianna look bad. The silence after that was different from the silence before. Before, they had been waiting to see if I would explode. Now they were waiting to see if Mom could explain. Mom pressed a napkin to her mouth. You're really going to humiliate your own mother? I felt something in me go cold and clear. You humiliated me with lies, I said. I'm answering with records. Brianna wiped at her cheeks. You care more about being right than being kind. No. I cared so much about being kind that I paid bills I didn't owe and kept secrets that protected you. You mistook my silence for permission. Mason said. I didn't know all the details. I looked at him. But you knew enough to stay quiet while I got blamed. His face reddened. Uncle Paul picked up a page, squinted at it and set it down like it was hot. This should have been handled privately. I stared at him. You didn't say that when you texted me to stop making Mom beg. His mouth shut. Aunt Rachel had been reading steadily, flipping pages with the same focus she used when she checked grocery receipts at the register. She looked at the funeral home invoice, then the estate email chain, then the text from Mom that said, "Thank you for covering this. Please don't bring it up to Brianna tonight." Finally, she took off her glasses and looked at my mother. "Gloria," she said, "is any of this fake?" Mom had speeches for my cruelty, my attitude, my coldness. She did not have a speech for my bank statements. She stared at Rachel. Her eyes filled but no answer came. Rachel asked again, quieter this time. "Is any of this fake?" Brianna whispered. "Mom." Mom said, "It's out of context." Rachel tapped the funeral receipt. "Then give the context. Did Caitlin pay this balance or not?" Mom looked down. "Did she handle these estate emails you said she ignored?" Rachel asked. Mom's lips pressed together. "Did Brianna borrow from the account?" Brianna burst out. "I was going to put it back." The room shifted. Not dramatically. No one gasped like in a movie, but shoulders stiffened. Eyes moved. People who had been staring at me turned toward Brianna. Cousin Mark was the first to say it out loud. "Wait. Borrow from what account?" Brianna covered her face. I couldn't think straight. I was drowning. I said, "You thought clearly enough to ask me not to tell Mom. Then Mom asked me not to tell the family." Mom snapped. "I was trying to protect your sister." "And who were you protecting me from?" She looked at me like the question itself was offensive. I pointed at the waiver. "You tried to get me to sign away reimbursement claims after you knew why the account was short. It was a formality. It was a cleanup." Rachel's voice cut through before Mom could respond. "No one should be signing anything at a dinner table." For the first time all night, Mom looked scared. Brianna grabbed Mason's sleeve. "Say something." Mason looked around the room and realized, maybe too late, that staying neutral was no longer safe. "I knew she borrowed some," he said. "I didn't know it was that much. I thought Gloria had handled it." I almost laughed again. "Handled it means I paid it." He flinched. Mom turned on him. "Mason." "What?" he said, defensive now. "I didn't want to get between sisters." "You didn't get between sisters," Rachel said. "You stood behind the one spending money and watched the other one get blamed." That shut him up. The group chat was exploding. Phones buzzed and buzzed, lighting up on the table and in people's laps. "Cousin Mark." "Gloria, did Caitlin pay the funeral balance or not?" "Aunt Rachel." "The invoice is in the folder. It has her confirmation number." "Aunt Linda." "This is awful. Patrick would hate this." "Me." Patrick also wrote that both daughters should be treated fairly. I attached the photo of Dad's handwritten note. For a while, nobody at the table said anything. The house that had been staged for family healing now looked like the aftermath of a storm. Half-eaten casserole on paper plates. Coffee going cold. Dad's smiling photos watching from the side table. The watch still open in its velvet box, sitting between Mom and Brianna like an accusation. Mom finally sat down. "You've made your point," she said. "No," I said. "I've corrected yours." She looked wounded. "You really hate me that much?" That one almost got me. Not because I believed it, but because some old part of me still wanted to rush in and clarify, soothe, prove I was good. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap. "I loved this family enough to carry things quietly for years," I said. "I'm not carrying this lie." Brianna said. "I said I would pay it back when I could." "You said that about a lot of things. You act like you're perfect." "No. I act like adults should explain missing money before asking someone else to sign away their right to ask about it." Uncle Paul stood and muttered something about needing air. Aunt Linda followed him to the kitchen. A few cousins stayed frozen in place, reading their phones. probably catching up on the evidence folder they had not expected to receive with dessert. Rachel looked at me. Do you have copies of everything? Yes. Good. She looked at Mom. Until the money is explained, nobody asks Caitlin for an apology. And nobody touches that watch. Mom's head snapped up. Rachel, this is not your place. Rachel's voice stayed calm. You made it everybody's place when you invited everybody here to watch her sign that paper. For the first time in my life, someone else said the obvious thing before I had to. I picked up the waiver, looked at it one more time, and placed it back on the table in front of Mom. I'm not signing this, I said. Mom whispered. Your father would be ashamed. I stood. Dad paid his bills and hated liars. That was the only sharp thing I said all night. I don't regret it. I picked up my folder but left the extra printed timeline on the table. Then I walked out without slamming the door. I did not want to give them a soundbite. Outside, the air felt colder than I expected. I sat in my car for a minute with both hands on the steering wheel, shaking in a way I had not let myself shake inside. My phone kept buzzing. I turned it face down on the passenger seat. I cried for about 5 minutes. Not pretty crying. Angry, exhausted crying. The kind where your face hurts and your throat feels scraped raw. Then I drove home. By the time I got inside, the group chat had become a crime scene. Cousin Jenna. Caitlin, I owe you an apology. I should have asked before judging. Cousin Mark. Gloria, people need a straight answer. Did Brianna take money from the account? Aunt Linda. I still think this should have been handled privately. Me. It was private until I was publicly accused of abandoning my family. Uncle Paul did not reply after that. Mom wrote, I am devastated that my own daughter would choose humiliation over compassion. Rachel answered before I could. Aunt Rachel. The numbers need to be explained before anyone asks Caitlin for an apology. Brianna sent a long message about grief, panic, and how she never meant to hurt anyone. She said she had been drowning. She said money felt unreal after Dad died. She said she thought Mom had handled it. She said I had always made her feel small. She did not say where the money went. Mason texted me privately about an hour later. I didn't know it was that much, he wrote. I looked at it while standing in my kitchen, still wearing my black sweater, eating crackers because I had barely touched dinner. A year earlier, I might have comforted him. I might have said, I know, or it's complicated, or I'm not blaming you. I might have given him a softer version of the truth so he could feel like a decent man caught in a hard situation. Instead, I wrote, you knew enough to stay quiet while I got blamed. He replied, I didn't want to get between sisters. I wrote, any repayment conversation needs to be in writing and include Gloria and Rachel. Don't contact me privately about this again. He sent back, okay. Just that. Okay. It was amazing how small people sounded when you stopped giving them room to explain themselves into innocence. The next morning, Mom called me 7 times before 10 a.m. I did not answer. She left 2 voicemails. I saved them without listening right away. Brianna sent, I hope you're happy. I replied, I'm not happy. I'm done. Then I wrote one final message to the family group chat. I kept it short because I knew if I wrote too much, people would pick it apart instead of reading it. I am not signing the waiver. I will not pay any more expenses for Mom or Brianna. I will not hide financial issues to protect anyone's image. Any estate or keepsake conversations need to happen in writing. Rachel can be included if she agrees. I will not attend gatherings where the goal is to pressure me into apologizing for facts. If the story that I abandoned this family is repeated, I will send the timeline and documents to whoever hears it. I'm not asking anyone to take my side. I'm asking everyone to stop asking me to pay for a version of events you now know is false. I read it 3 times, removed one sentence that called Brianna a thief and sent it. Then I muted the chat. Not blocked. Muted. That felt important. Blocking would have been dramatic in a way they could use. Muting was for me. It meant I could check when I wanted to, not when they demanded access to my nervous system. Over the next week, the fallout was messy in the most realistic way possible. Jenna sent a real apology. Not a perfect one, but real. I'm sorry, she wrote. I believed your mom because she sounded so hurt. That wasn't fair. I wrote back. Thank you for saying that. Mark apologized too. Then asked if the funeral receipt was okay to reference when talking to his dad because Uncle Paul was still saying I went nuclear. I told him yes, as long as he did not forward anything outside the family. Aunt Linda never apologized. She just stopped posting grief quotes for a while. Uncle Paul sent one message that said, "Families shouldn't air dirty laundry." I almost replied, "Then stop helping people soil it," but I didn't. Growth apparently. Rachel called 2 days after the dinner. "You all right?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I'm clear." "That's sometimes better." I sat on my couch with my knees tucked under me, looking at the folder on my coffee table. "Did you know?" Rachel sighed. "Not the details. I knew Gloria favored Brianna. I didn't know she was letting you pay for it." "I kept letting her." "That doesn't make it your fault." I wanted to argue, but I was too tired. Rachel said, "Your dad's watch is still at Gloria's. I told her not to give it to anyone until this is settled." "She won't listen." "She might not. But now people are watching." That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Now people are watching. For years, Mom's power came from doing things in layers. Warm public voice, sharp private voice. Sad posts, quiet requests. Praise for Brianna, invoices for me. If I complained, I looked petty because no one saw the whole machine. They only saw my reaction. The folder showed the machine. Mom did not apologize. She sent messages that sounded like apologies if you read them while half asleep. "I'm sorry you feel so unappreciated. I'm sorry grief made everyone emotional. I'm sorry you felt the need to embarrass us." I did not respond. Brianna also did not apologize. She sent one long message saying she had never asked to be the favorite, which was interesting because nobody had used that word in the chat. She said I had always resented her for being more emotional. She said I had no idea what it was like to feel everything so deeply. I typed back, "Feeling deeply is not a payment plan." Then I deleted it. I did not need to win every sentence. What I did do was stop paying. When Mom texted that her utility bill was a little tight this month, I replied, "I'm not available for financial help." When Brianna sent a Venmo request by accident, then immediately canceled it and wrote, "Sorry, wrong person," I did not answer. When Mason asked if I could send just the total, without including the screenshots because Brianna was embarrassed, I wrote, "No." When Mom tried to plan another dinner just for healing, I wrote, "I'm not attending any family meeting without a written agenda." She replied, "Listen to yourself." I did. I sounded sane. A few weeks later, Rachel told me Brianna had agreed to a repayment schedule. I don't know if she followed it perfectly. I stopped making it my job to monitor her character. Rachel also said the watch had been placed with the estate paperwork until everyone agreed in writing what to do with Dad's personal items. Part of me still wanted the watch so badly it hurt. Not because it was expensive. It probably needed a new battery and a better strap. I wanted it because when I held it, I remember being 7 years old, pressing my ear to Dad's wrist and pretending I could hear time moving. But after the dinner, I realized the watch was not the only thing I had been trying to keep. I had been trying to keep proof that I mattered to him. Gloria knew that. That was why she used it. She knew money would make me look ugly if I fought back, but the watch would make me bleed. I don't know whether I'll end up with it. Maybe Rachel will help settle it fairly. Maybe it will sit in a box for a while because nobody wants to touch it now. Maybe Brianna will still somehow get it and tell herself she earned it by crying in the right rooms. But I know this. I did not sign away my right to the truth. That mattered more. The strangest part after everything was how quiet my life became. No emergency texts. No late-night guilt calls. No "can you just this once?" No family group chat buzzing while I tried to sleep. For the first few days, the quiet felt like punishment. Then it started to feel like air. I still think about Dad. I think about what he would have said if he had been at that table. I don't use him the way Mom does, as a prop for whatever argument makes me look worse. I don't know if he would have been angry, sad, embarrassed, or all of it. I do know he hated when people lied about small things because he said small lies were how people practice for big ones. Mom had practiced for years. Brianna had benefited for years. And I had paid for years. At the memorial dinner, I stopped. Some relatives still think I went too far by exposing everything in front of the family. Maybe they're uncomfortable because the proof made them part of the story too. It's easier to say I should have stayed private than to admit they helped punish me publicly without asking one honest question. I can live with that discomfort now. I used to think silence made me mature. Really, it just made me useful to people who needed me quiet. I used to think being called selfish was something I had to disprove immediately, with money, time, labor, whatever they demanded. Now I let the word sit there and prove nothing. Gloria can tell people she is hurt. Brianna can tell people she was drowning. Mason can tell people he did not know all the details. They can use whatever soft words help them sleep. I have the folder. I have the timeline. I have my own piece finally separated from their version of family peace. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped funding the lie that kept it looking whole. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.